Welcome to my channel. Have you ever wondered how some people start learning English from zero and later speak with confidence? What if I told you that I was once afraid of English too? I could not speak, I made mistakes, and I felt nervous every time I tried. But one simple decision changed everything. Today, I will share the complete story of how I started learning English, the mistakes I made, the lessons I learned, and the simple methods that helped me improve. Make sure you stay until the end, because some of the easiest and most powerful techniques came later in my journey. Chapter 1. When I first saw English, I did not think it would become such an important part of my life. To be honest, English looked difficult, confusing, and sometimes even impossible. Maybe you feel the same way right now. Maybe when you see a long English sentence, your mind says, "This is too hard for me." Well, that was exactly how I felt. I still remember sitting in my classroom and looking at English words written on the board. Some students seemed to understand them, but I did not. The letters were familiar, but the meaning was not. I could read some words, but I could not understand what they meant. I could memorize vocabulary for an exam, but a few days later I forgot everything. Have you ever experienced that? You study a word today, and tomorrow it disappears from your memory. If your answer is yes, then don't worry, because that was my experience too. At that time, I believed that learning English was only for smart people. I thought fluent speakers had a special talent that I did not have. Whenever I heard someone speaking English confidently, I felt amazed. I wondered, how can they speak so fast? How do they know so many words? Will I ever be able to speak like that? Maybe you have asked yourself these same questions. The truth is that many English learners think fluent speakers were born with a gift. But later I discovered something very important. Fluent speakers are not born fluent. They become fluent through practice. But at the beginning, I did not know that. I thought English was a mountain that was too high to climb. Every new grammar rule looked difficult. Every new vocabulary list looked endless. Every listening exercise sounded like noise. Sometimes I opened my English book and felt tired before I even started studying. I wanted to learn, but I did not know how. I wanted to speak, but I was afraid of making mistakes. I wanted to understand movies and videos, but everything seemed too fast. So what did I do? Like many beginners, I avoided English whenever possible. If I saw a difficult paragraph, I skipped it. If someone asked me to speak English, I became nervous. If there was a chance to practice, I often stayed silent because I was afraid people would laugh at my mistakes. Looking back now, I realized that fear was my biggest problem, not English itself. English was not stopping me. My fear was stopping me. But at that time, I did not understand this lesson. I thought my problem was vocabulary. I thought my problem was grammar. I thought my problem was pronunciation. The real problem was that I did not believe I could improve. Then something interesting happened. One day, I started paying attention to people who spoke English well. I listened to their stories. I watched interviews. I watched YouTube videos. And I noticed something surprising. Many fluent English speakers said they were once beginners too. They also struggled. They also made mistakes. They also forgot words. They also felt nervous. Suddenly, English did not seem like a magical skill anymore. It seemed like a journey. And if it was a journey, maybe I could travel that road too. This idea changed everything for me. Instead of asking, "Can I become fluent?" I started asking, "What small step can I take today?" That simple question opened a new door in my mind. I no longer focused on becoming perfect. I started focusing on becoming better, just a little better each day. One word, one sentence, one lesson, one practice session. That was enough. And do you know something? The moment I stopped trying to become perfect was the moment I started making progress. My journey did not become easy overnight. I still made mistakes. I still forgot vocabulary. I still felt nervous sometimes. But I discovered something powerful. Every person who speaks English today was once a beginner. Every confident speaker once struggled with simple words. Every fluent speaker once made embarrassing mistakes. And if they could improve, maybe I could too. Maybe you can too. So if you are watching this video and thinking, "My English is not good enough," I want you to remember something. The story you are watching right now did not begin with confidence. It did not begin with fluency. It began with confusion, mistakes, fear, and uncertainty. But it also began with one important thing: a decision to keep going. And in the next chapter, I'm going to tell you about the exact moment when I stopped making excuses and made a serious decision to learn English. That moment completely changed the direction of my life, and it might change the way you think about learning English too. Chapter 2. There was a moment in my life when everything started to change. It was not a magical moment. There were no fireworks. There was no sudden secret that appeared in front of me. It was actually a very simple moment, but it became one of the most important moments of my English learning journey. One day, I was watching a video online. The speaker was talking in English, and thousands of people were enjoying the content. They were laughing, learning, and understanding everything. But I could not understand much. I knew a few words here and there, but most of the conversation felt like a mystery. I kept pausing the video. I kept replaying sentences. I kept guessing the meaning. After a while, I felt frustrated. Have you ever watched an English video and thought, "I wish I could understand this without subtitles"? Have you ever listened to someone speaking English and wished you could join the conversation? That was exactly how I felt. I wanted to understand more. I wanted to communicate more. I wanted to open the door to a bigger world. But at that moment, I realized something important. Wishing was not enough. Wanting was not enough. Dreaming was not enough. If I truly wanted to learn English, I had to do something about it. I had spent months telling myself that I would start tomorrow. Maybe you know this word very well. Tomorrow. Tomorrow I will study. Tomorrow I will practice. Tomorrow I will start speaking. Tomorrow I will learn new vocabulary. But somehow, tomorrow never came. Every day became another tomorrow. And the funny thing is that many people spend years waiting for the perfect time to begin. They think they need more free time. They think they need a better course. They think they need more confidence. They think they need a perfect plan. But the truth is that the perfect time never arrives. One evening, I asked myself a simple question. If I continue doing nothing, where will my English be 1 year from now? The answer was obvious. it would stay exactly the same? That question hit me hard. I suddenly understood that improvement would not happen automatically. I had to make a choice. Either I could continue making excuses, or I could start learning. So that day, I made a promise to myself. I decided that I would stop waiting and start taking action. It was a small decision, but it changed everything. Now let me tell you something important. When I made that decision, I was not motivated every day. I was not excited every day. I was not confident every day. Many people believe successful learners feel motivated all the time. That is not true. Some days I felt excited. Some days I felt tired. Some days I felt inspired. Some days I wanted to quit. But I learned a powerful lesson. Motivation can help you start, but habits help you continue. That was a lesson I would understand much better later. At the beginning, I simply focused on one thing, showing up every day. Even if I learned only one word, I studied. Even if I listened to English for only a few minutes, I listened. Even if I spoke only one sentence, I spoke. Small actions may look unimportant, but they create big results over time. Imagine a person who saves $1 every day. $1 seems small, but after many days, it becomes something meaningful. Learning English works the same way. One word, one sentence, one lesson, one day at a time. The problem is that many learners quit before they see the results. They plant a seed and then dig it up the next day to see if it is growing. Learning English does not work like that. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes consistency. During those early days, I stopped asking, how can I become fluent quickly? Instead, I started asking, what can I learn today? That simple change made a huge difference. Suddenly, English felt less overwhelming. I no longer worried about learning everything at once. I focused on learning one small thing at a time. And something amazing started happening. Little by little, English became less scary. Words that once looked strange became familiar. Sentences that once looked difficult became easier to understand. I was not fluent, not even close. But I was moving forward. And moving forward felt much better than standing still. Looking back now, I realized that the most important day in my English journey was not the day I spoke fluently. It was not the day I understood a movie. It was not the day I learned hundreds of words. The most important day was the day I decided to begin. Because every success that came later started with that one decision. And if you are watching this right now, maybe today can be that day for you too. Maybe today can be the day you stop waiting. Maybe today can be the day you stop making excuses. Maybe today can be the day you take your first real step toward English fluency. But before my progress started, I made several mistakes that slowed me down. In fact, I made some of the most common mistakes that almost every English learner makes. And in the next chapter, I'm going to share those mistakes with you, because if you can avoid them, you can save yourself months or even years of frustration. Chapter 3. After I finally decided to take English seriously, I thought progress would happen quickly. I believed that if I studied hard for a few weeks, I would suddenly become confident and fluent. But that is not what happened. In fact, I made several mistakes that slowed down my progress. Looking back now, I am actually happy that I made those mistakes because they taught me some valuable lessons. And there is a good chance that you might be making some of these same mistakes right now. So listen carefully, because this chapter might save you months of frustration. My first mistake was trying to memorize too many words. Every day, I would open a vocabulary list and try to learn 20, 30, or even 50 new words. At first, I felt productive. I felt like I was working hard. I had notebooks full of vocabulary. I had pages filled with definitions. But there was one problem. I never used those words. I simply memorized them. A few days later, most of them disappeared from my memory. Have you ever learned a word, felt proud of yourself, and then completely forgotten it a week later? I certainly did. I learned that vocabulary is like a plant. If you never water it by using it, it slowly dies. Learning words is important, but using words is even more important. Then I made another mistake. I became obsessed with grammar. Now, grammar is useful. Grammar helps us communicate clearly. But I thought grammar was the answer to everything. I spent hours reading grammar rules. I studied tenses. I studied sentence structures. I studied complicated explanations. But there was one thing I was not doing. I was not speaking. I knew the rules, but I could not use them naturally. It was like reading hundreds of books about swimming without ever getting into the water. You may know everything about swimming, but until you jump into the pool, you cannot truly swim. The same is true for English. You can study grammar all day, but if you never practice speaking, your progress will be slow. Then came another mistake that many learners make. I compared myself to fluent speakers. This mistake was probably the most painful of all. I would watch someone speaking English smoothly and confidently. Then I would compare my beginner English to their advanced English. Of course, I felt disappointed. I thought they were better than me. I thought I was too slow. I thought I was not talented enough. What I did not realize was that I was comparing my chapter 1 to their chapter 20. I was comparing my beginning to their years of practice. It was not a fair comparison. Imagine planting a small tree and then becoming upset because it is not as tall as a tree that has been growing for 20 years. That would not make sense. Growth takes time. Learning English takes time too. But at that stage, I did not understand that. I just felt frustrated. Then I made another common mistake. I waited until I felt ready. I kept telling myself, I will start speaking when my grammar is perfect. I will start speaking when I know more vocabulary. I will start speaking when I feel confident. But the funny thing is that confidence never arrived. Why? Because confidence is created through action. It does not appear before action. The more I waited, the more nervous I became. The more nervous I became, the longer I waited. It became a cycle that kept me stuck. Maybe you have experienced something similar. Maybe you are waiting for the perfect moment to start speaking English. Let me tell you something important. That perfect moment does not exist. You become ready by practicing, not by waiting. Another mistake I made was focusing too much on difficult materials. I thought difficult content would help me improve faster. So, I listened to advanced podcasts. I watched complicated videos. I read difficult articles. Most of the time, I understood almost nothing. Instead of feeling motivated, I felt overwhelmed. It was like trying to lift 100 kilograms on your first day at the gym. The weight was simply too heavy. Later, I discovered that simple materials are often the most powerful, simple stories, simple conversations, simple videos. These helped me learn much faster because I could actually understand and enjoy them. Then there was one final mistake that almost made me quit. I expected results too quickly. After 1 week of studying, I wanted fluency. After 1 month, I wanted confidence. After a few lessons, I wanted perfect pronunciation. When those things did not happen, I felt discouraged. But one day I realized something important. Learning English is not a race. It is a journey. Every day of practice is a step forward. Some steps are small. Some steps are big. But all progress matters. Once I understood this, everything started changing. I stopped chasing perfection. I stopped worrying about being the best. I stopped comparing myself to others. Instead, I focused on improving a little every day, and that was the moment my learning journey began to feel easier and more enjoyable. But the biggest breakthrough was still waiting for me. Soon, I discovered one simple daily habit that completely changed the way I learned English. It was easy, it was practical, and it helped me improve faster than anything I had tried before. In the next chapter, I will share that habit with you, and it might become the turning point in your English journey too. Chapter 4. After making so many mistakes, I finally discovered something that completely changed my English learning journey. The surprising part is that it was not a secret method. It was not an expensive course. It was not a magic app. It was something much simpler than that. It was a daily habit. At first, I thought I needed to study for hours every day to improve. I believe that successful English learners spent 5 or 6 hours studying vocabulary and grammar. Because of this belief, I often felt overwhelmed. Some days I had a lot of free time, but most days I did not. Whenever I could not study for several hours, I felt like I was failing. Then one day, I realized something important. Learning English is not about how much you study in one day. It is about how often you study. That idea changed everything. Instead of trying to study for hours, I made a promise to spend a little time with English every single day. Some days it was 10 minutes. Some days it was 20 minutes. Some days it was 30 minutes. The important thing was that I showed up every day. At first, it felt too simple. I wondered if such a small habit could really make a difference. But I decided to trust the process. Every morning or evening, I spent a little time reading simple English stories. Not difficult stories, not advanced books, just simple stories that I could understand. When I found a new word, I did not panic. I simply learned it and continued reading. Sometimes I listened to short English videos. Sometimes I watched beginner lessons. Sometimes I listened to people having simple conversations. I was not trying to understand every single word. I was simply training my brain to become familiar with English. And something interesting started happening. After a few weeks, words that once seemed strange started becoming familiar. Sentences that once looked confusing started making sense. I was not becoming fluent overnight, but I was improving. The best part was that learning English no longer felt like a painful task. It became part of my daily routine. Think about brushing your teeth. You do not brush your teeth once a month for 5 hours. You brush them for a few minutes every day. That is what keeps your teeth healthy. English works the same way. Small daily practice is much more powerful than occasional marathon study sessions. This lesson was one of the biggest breakthroughs in my journey. I remember one day when I was reading a simple English article. Suddenly, I realized I could understand much more than before. The article had words and sentences that used to confuse me, but now they felt natural. It was a small victory, but it felt amazing. Have you ever experienced that feeling? Have you ever looked back and realized that something which once seemed difficult now feels easy? That is one of the most exciting parts of learning English. Progress often happens quietly. You do not notice it every day. Then one day you suddenly realize how far you have come. Another thing that helped me was focusing on useful English instead of random English. Instead of memorizing long lists of difficult vocabulary, I learned phrases that people actually use in daily conversations. For example, phrases like, "How are you? What are you doing? Nice to meet you. What about you?" and "See you later." These simple phrases helped me communicate much faster. I learned that communication is more important than perfection. If you can use simple English confidently, you can have real conversations. And real conversations help you improve even more. As the weeks passed, my confidence slowly started growing. I was still making mistakes. I was still forgetting words sometimes. But I was no longer afraid of English. English was becoming a normal part of my life. And that happened because of one simple habit: daily practice. Not perfect practice, not long practice, just consistent practice. This is where many learners struggle. They feel motivated for a few days. They study hard for a week. Then they stop. A few weeks later, they start again. Then they stop again. It becomes a cycle. But consistency breaks that cycle. Even 5 or 10 minutes every day can create amazing results over time. Imagine improving just 1% every day. At first, that improvement seems small, but after months of consistent effort, those small improvements become something powerful. Looking back now, I can honestly say that this daily habit built the foundation for everything that came later. It helped me improve my vocabulary. It helped me improve my listening. It helped me improve my reading. Most importantly, it helped me believe that I could actually learn English. But there was still one big challenge waiting for me. Even though I was learning more words and understanding more English, I still had a problem. I was afraid to speak. I knew vocabulary. I knew some grammar. I could understand simple content. But opening my mouth and speaking English felt completely different. That challenge would lead me to one of the most powerful techniques I ever discovered. And the surprising part is that I did not need a teacher, a classroom, or even a speaking partner to use it. In the next chapter, I will show you exactly how I started speaking English alone, and how that simple method transformed my confidence forever. Chapter 5. Even though I had started building a daily English habit and was understanding more words than before, there was still one problem that refused to go away. I was afraid to speak. Maybe you know exactly what I am talking about. Have you ever understood an English sentence in your mind but could not say it out loud? Have you ever wanted to speak English but felt nervous the moment you opened your mouth? That was me. I could read simple stories. I could understand some videos. I could learn new vocabulary. But when it came time to speak, everything seemed to disappear. My mind became empty. The words that I had learned suddenly hid somewhere inside my brain. I started wondering if I would ever become confident enough to speak English. Then one day, I discovered something that completely changed my confidence. The surprising thing is that I did not find a speaking partner. I did not join an expensive course. I did not travel to another country. Instead, I started talking to myself in English. Now, when people hear this, they sometimes laugh. They think it sounds strange. But listen carefully, because this simple habit became one of the most powerful tools in my entire English learning journey. At first, I started with very simple sentences. I looked around my room and described what I could see. I would say, "This is my chair. This is my phone. I am sitting at my desk. Today is a beautiful day." The sentences were simple, but something important was happening. For the first time, I was actively using English instead of only studying it. At the beginning, I made many mistakes. Sometimes I forgot words. Sometimes I used incorrect grammar. Sometimes I stopped in the middle of a sentence because I did not know what to say next. But instead of getting frustrated, I kept going. I learned an important lesson. Speaking is a skill, and every skill improves through practice. Think about riding a bicycle. The first time you ride, you probably feel nervous. You might lose your balance. You might make mistakes. But every time you practice, you improve a little more. Speaking English works exactly the same way. The more you speak, the easier it becomes. One of my favorite exercises was talking about my daily routine. Every morning, I would describe what I was doing. I would say, "I am making breakfast. I am drinking tea. I am going to work. I am reading a book." These were not complicated sentences, but they helped me build confidence. Then I started talking about my plans. I would ask myself questions. What am I going to do today? What do I want to learn this week? Then I would answer those questions in English. Little by little, English started feeling more natural. Another thing I discovered was that speaking alone removed a lot of pressure. When you speak with other people, you may worry about making mistakes. You may worry about being judged. You may worry about your pronunciation. But when you speak alone, none of those fears exist. You are free to experiment. You are free to make mistakes. You are free to learn at your own pace. This made a huge difference for me. I stopped waiting until I was perfect. Instead, I started practicing with the English I already knew. One day, something amazing happened. I was talking to myself in English as usual when I noticed that sentences were coming more quickly. I did not need to stop and think as much. My brain was starting to create English automatically. It was not perfect, but it was progress. And that progress motivated me to continue. Have you ever noticed that confidence grows after action, not before action? Many learners think they need confidence before they start speaking. But confidence actually comes from speaking. The more you practice, the more confident you become. The more confident you become, the more you practice. It becomes a positive cycle. I also learned that mistakes are not the enemy. In fact, mistakes are teachers. Every mistake shows you something new. Every mistake helps you improve. Imagine a child learning to walk. Nobody expects that child to walk perfectly on the first day. Everyone understands that falling is part of learning. Speaking English is no different. Mistakes are part of the process. Once I accepted this idea, I stopped fearing mistakes and started focusing on communication. Suddenly, English became more enjoyable. I was no longer trying to sound perfect. I was simply trying to express my ideas. And the funny thing is that when I stopped chasing perfection, my English actually improved faster. Looking back now, talking to myself in English was one of the smartest decisions I ever made. It cost nothing. It required no special equipment, and I could do it any time and anywhere. It transformed my confidence and prepared me for real conversations later. But another breakthrough was waiting for me. One day, I discovered a method that helped me improve my listening, pronunciation, speaking, and confidence at the same time. It felt almost like having a personal English coach available every day. And once I started using this method, my progress became faster than ever before. In the next chapter, I will share that powerful technique and explain how it helped me take my English to the next level. Chapter 6. As my confidence slowly started growing, I began looking for new ways to improve my English faster. I had already built a daily habit. I was talking to myself in English. I was reading simple stories. I was learning useful vocabulary, but I still felt that something was missing. I could understand some English, but native speakers still sounded very fast. Sometimes I could understand individual words, but I could not understand complete sentences. It felt like English was moving too quickly for my ears. Have you ever watched an English video and thought, why do they speak so fast? Have you ever understood subtitles but struggled to understand the actual voice? If your answer is yes, then you know exactly how I felt. One day, while watching an English lesson online, I discovered a technique that would completely change my learning journey. The technique was called shadowing. At first, the name sounded strange. I wondered what it meant. Then I learned something very simple. Shadowing means listening to a native speaker and immediately repeating what they say. You become their shadow. They speak first, and you follow right behind them. It sounded easy, but when I tried it for the first time, it was much harder than I expected. The speaker said a sentence, and before I could repeat it, the next sentence had already started. My tongue felt slow. My brain felt confused. I made mistakes almost every few seconds. But I remembered an important lesson that I had learned earlier. Every new skill feels difficult at the beginning. So instead of quitting, I kept practicing. I started with very short videos. Sometimes I used videos that were only 1 or 2 minutes long. I listened carefully. I repeated every sentence. I copied the pronunciation. I copied the rhythm. I copied the pauses. At first, I sounded awkward. Sometimes I even laughed at myself. But something interesting started happening after a few days. My ears became sharper. I started noticing pronunciation patterns that I had never noticed before. I started hearing how words connected together in real conversations. I started understanding spoken English more easily. It felt like my brain was slowly adjusting to the sound of the language. Then I noticed another benefit. My pronunciation began improving too. Before shadowing, I often pronounced words exactly as they were written. But English pronunciation does not always work that way. Native speakers connect words together. They reduce sounds, They speak with rhythm and emotion. By repeating what I heard, I was training my mouth to move in a more natural way. Little by little, my pronunciation became clearer. The best part was that I did not need expensive tools. I only needed a simple video and my voice. Sometimes I practiced with English teachers on YouTube. Sometimes I practiced with interviews. Sometimes I practiced with short stories. The important thing was not the material itself. The important thing was active participation. I was no longer sitting quietly and listening. I was speaking along with the speaker. That made a huge difference. One day, after several weeks of shadowing practice, I experienced something exciting. I was watching an English video, and suddenly I realized that I could understand much more without subtitles. It felt amazing. For a moment, I almost could not believe it. The same language that once sounded impossible was starting to feel familiar. Of course, I still missed some words. I was still learning, but I could clearly see my progress. That moment gave me even more motivation to continue. Another thing I loved about shadowing was that it improved multiple skills at the same time. Usually, when you study vocabulary, you improve vocabulary. When you study grammar, you improve grammar. But shadowing helped my listening, speaking, pronunciation, confidence, and fluency all together. It was like exercising several muscles with one workout. The more I practiced, the more natural English began to feel. I also learned something surprising. Fluency is not only about knowing words. Fluency is about using words smoothly. Many learners know hundreds or even thousands of words, but they struggle to speak because their brain is not used to producing English quickly. Shadowing helped solve that problem. It trained my brain to think and respond faster. Over time, speaking became less stressful and more automatic. Looking back now, shadowing was one of the most effective techniques I ever used. It did not make me fluent overnight. Nothing does. But it accelerated my progress and gave me confidence that I was moving in the right direction. More importantly, it taught me that learning English can be active and enjoyable. You do not always need to sit with a textbook. Sometimes the best learning happens when you listen, repeat, and engage with the language in a natural way. But even with all this progress, there was still one challenge that continued to hold me back. It was a challenge that affects almost every English learner in the world. It was the fear of making mistakes in front of other people. For a long time, that fear controlled me. It stopped me from speaking when I had opportunities. It made me doubt myself. But eventually, I discovered a powerful truth about mistakes that completely changed my mindset. And in the next chapter, I am going to share that lesson with you, because it may be the key that finally unlocks your confidence in English. Chapter 7. Even though my listening was improving, my vocabulary was growing, and my confidence was becoming stronger, there was still one problem that continued to follow me everywhere. It was the fear of making mistakes. This fear was invisible, but it felt very powerful. Every time I wanted to speak English in front of someone, I would start worrying. What if I say something wrong? What if my grammar is incorrect? What if my pronunciation sounds strange? What if people laugh at me? Maybe you have asked yourself these same questions. Maybe you have stayed silent even when you knew the answer. Maybe you have avoided speaking because you were afraid of making mistakes. If that sounds familiar, then this chapter is especially for you. For a long time, I believe that good English learners were people who made very few mistakes. I thought successful learners always spoke correctly. I thought fluent speakers were born with confidence. But one day, I discovered something that completely changed my mindset. I started paying attention to people who were already fluent in English. I listened carefully to conversations. I watched interviews. I watched teachers, speakers, and professionals. And I noticed something surprising. Even fluent speakers sometimes make mistakes. Sometimes they forget a word. Sometimes they correct themselves. Sometimes they use the wrong word and then immediately fix it. That realization shocked me. I had spent so much time trying to avoid mistakes that I forgot something important. Mistakes are a normal part of communication. In fact, mistakes are a normal part of learning anything. Think about a baby learning to walk. The baby falls hundreds of times before learning how to walk confidently. Imagine if the baby stopped after the first fall and said, "Walking is not for me." That would sound ridiculous. Yet many English learners do exactly that. They make one mistake and immediately think they are not good enough. They pronounce one word incorrectly and decide they cannot speak English. They forget one sentence and believe they are failing. I used to think that way too. Then one day, I decided to change my perspective. Instead of seeing mistakes as proof that I was failing, I started seeing them as proof that I was learning. Every mistake became feedback. Every mistake became a lesson. Every mistake showed me what I needed to improve next. That simple change transformed my confidence. I remember one particular moment very clearly. I was trying to have a conversation in English, and I accidentally used the wrong word. As soon as I said it, I realized my mistake. For a second, I felt embarrassed. But then, something unexpected happened. The other person smiled, corrected me politely, and continued the conversation. The world did not end. Nobody laughed at me. Nobody criticized me. In fact, I learned something new because of that mistake. That moment taught me a lesson that I will never forget. Most people are not judging your mistakes as much as you think they are. Most people are simply listening to your message. They appreciate your effort. They respect the fact that you are trying to communicate in another language. Another thing that helped me was realizing that communication is more important than perfection. Imagine that you are hungry and visiting a foreign country. You walk into a restaurant and say, "I want food, please." Is the sentence perfect? No. But does the waiter understand you? Absolutely. Communication happened. The purpose of language is communication. Of course, we want to improve our grammar and pronunciation, but we should never let perfection stop us from communicating. One of the biggest breakthroughs in my journey happened when I gave myself permission to make mistakes. That may sound simple, but it was incredibly powerful. Instead of waiting until my English was perfect, I started speaking with the English I already knew. I used simple words. I used simple sentences. I focused on expressing my ideas. And something amazing happened. The more I spoke, the better I became. My mistakes gradually decreased because I was gaining real experience. Confidence started growing naturally. Not because I became perfect, but because I became comfortable making mistakes and learning from them. I also learned that every fluent English speaker has a history of mistakes. Every single one. Nobody becomes fluent without making errors. Nobody learns a language without feeling confused sometimes. The difference is that successful learners keep going. They do not allow mistakes to stop them. They use mistakes as stepping stones instead of roadblocks. Looking back now, I am grateful for my mistakes. They taught me patience. They taught me resilience. Most importantly, they taught me that progress matters more than perfection. And if you are watching this right now, I want you to remember something. Do not be afraid of making mistakes. Be afraid of never trying. Because every time you speak English, even imperfect English, you are moving one step closer to fluency. And once I finally stopped fearing mistakes, something incredible happened. I started noticing opportunities to use English everywhere. English was no longer just a subject that I studied. It was becoming part of my daily life. In the next chapter, I am going to show you how I surrounded myself with English every day and how that simple decision accelerated my learning more than I ever imagined. Chapter 8. Once I stopped being afraid of mistakes, a completely new world opened up in front of me. For the first time, I stopped seeing English as something that only existed inside textbooks. I stopped thinking that English was only something I could study during a lesson. Instead, I began seeing English as a living language that was everywhere around me. This was one of the biggest turning points in my journey. Before this, I treated English like a school subject. I would sit down, study for a short time, close my notebook, and then forget about English for the rest of the day. But one day, I realized something important. If I wanted English to become natural, I needed to make it part of my daily life. I needed to surround myself with English as much as possible. Now, when I first heard this advice, I thought it sounded impossible. After all, I was not living in an English-speaking country. I did not have English-speaking friends around me every day. I was not traveling abroad. So how could I surround myself with English? Then I discovered that creating an English environment was much easier than I thought. I started with small changes. One of the first things I did was change the language settings on my phone to English. At first, it felt strange. Some words looked unfamiliar. Sometimes I needed a few extra seconds to understand a menu or a setting. But after a few weeks, those words became part of my vocabulary. Every time I unlocked my phone, I was learning English without even realizing it. Then I started listening to English whenever I had free time. While walking, I listened to simple English podcasts. While cleaning my room, I listened to English conversations. While traveling, I listened to English stories. I was not always paying 100% attention, but my ears were constantly hearing the language. Slowly, English sounds started becoming more familiar. Then I began watching more English content. At first, I used subtitles. There is nothing wrong with subtitles when you are learning. In fact, they can be very helpful. But over time, I challenged myself to watch shorter videos without subtitles. Sometimes I understood 80%. Sometimes I understood only 50%. But I kept going. My goal was not perfect understanding. My goal was improvement. One of the most exciting moments happened when I realized I could understand a video without looking at the subtitles all the time. It felt like a small victory, but it gave me a huge boost of motivation. Another thing I started doing was reading simple English every day. Not difficult books, not complicated articles, just simple material that I could enjoy. Sometimes I read short stories. Sometimes I read English posts online. Sometimes I read beginner articles. The important thing was consistency. I wanted English to become part of my everyday routine. The more I read, the more familiar common words became. The more familiar those words became, the easier speaking and listening felt. It was like building a puzzle. Every small piece connected to another piece. Soon, I noticed something surprising. I was starting to think about English even when I was not studying. Sometimes I would see an object and immediately think of its English name. Sometimes I would create simple English sentences in my mind while walking. Sometimes I would imagine conversations and answer questions in English. This was exciting because it showed me that English was slowly becoming part of my thinking process. Have you ever experienced that moment? The moment when English stops feeling like a foreign language and starts feeling a little more natural? That feeling is incredible. It is one of the signs that your hard work is paying off. Another lesson I learned during this period was that you do not need a perfect environment to improve. Many learners believe they need to move to another country before they can become fluent. But I learned that fluency starts long before that. It starts with daily exposure. It starts with creating opportunities to use English right where you are. Even 10 or 15 minutes of extra exposure every day can make a huge difference over time. Looking back now, surrounding myself with English accelerated my learning more than I expected. English was no longer something I practiced only during study time. It became part of my daily routine. It became part of my entertainment. It became part of my habits. And because of that, progress started happening faster. But perhaps the most exciting change was still ahead of me. After months of daily practice, speaking to myself, shadowing videos, learning from mistakes, and surrounding myself with English, something happened that I had been dreaming about since the very beginning. I experienced my first real breakthrough. It was a moment that made me realize all my hard work was finally paying off. It was a moment I will never forget. And in the next chapter, I am going to tell you exactly what happened and why it completely changed my belief in what was possible. Chapter 9. After months of learning new words, practicing every day, talking to myself in English, listening to videos, shadowing native speakers, and slowly building confidence, something happened that I will never forget. It was not a huge event. It was not a graduation ceremony. It was not a perfect English conversation. In fact, if someone had watched the moment, they might have thought it was completely ordinary. But for me, it felt extraordinary. It felt like a dream becoming reality. One day, I was watching an English video online. Usually, when I watched English videos, I needed subtitles. Sometimes I paused the video. Sometimes I replayed the same sentence several times. But on this day, something was different. I started watching, and after a few minutes, I suddenly realized that I was understanding the speaker naturally. I was not translating every sentence into my native language. I was not stopping every few seconds. I was simply listening and understanding. For a moment, I almost could not believe it. I actually paused the video and asked myself, did that really just happen? It may sound like a small thing, but for me, it was a huge victory. It was proof that all those days of practice were working. It was proof that even though progress had often felt slow, my brain had been changing little by little. Have you ever planted a seed and waited for it to grow? Every day you look at the soil, and it seems like nothing is happening. But underground, the roots are growing. Then one day, a small green plant appears. Learning English felt exactly like that. For months, I had been watering the seed with daily practice. I had been learning vocabulary, listening, reading, speaking, and making mistakes. Sometimes it felt like nothing was changing, but beneath the surface, growth was happening. And on that day, I finally saw the result. That experience taught me one of the most important lessons of my entire journey. Progress is often invisible before it becomes visible. Many learners quit because they do not see immediate results. They study for a few weeks and think nothing is improving. They practice for a month and feel disappointed because they are not fluent yet. But the truth is that learning is happening even when you cannot see it. Every new word matters. Every sentence matters. Every minute of listening matters. All those small efforts are building something bigger. After that breakthrough, I started noticing other improvements too. I could understand more conversations. I could read faster. I could express my thoughts more easily. I still made mistakes, but those mistakes no longer felt scary. Instead, they felt like part of the journey. Another exciting moment happened when I found myself thinking in English without trying. I was walking outside one afternoon when I noticed something interesting. Instead of describing things in my native language, my brain automatically created simple English sentences. I looked at the sky and thought, "The weather is beautiful today." I saw people walking and thought, "They look happy." It happened naturally. No effort, no translation, just English. When that happened, I smiled because I remembered how impossible that once seemed. There was a time when even basic English felt difficult. Now my brain was beginning to use English automatically. That moment gave me even more confidence. But perhaps the biggest change was not my vocabulary or my pronunciation. The biggest change was my mindset. At the beginning of my journey, I doubted myself constantly. I wondered if I was smart enough. I wondered if I was talented enough. I wondered if I would ever become fluent. But after seeing real progress, I started believing in myself. I realized that fluency is not about talent. It is about consistency. It is about showing up every day, even when progress feels slow. It is about continuing when other people quit. It is about trusting the process. That lesson changed more than my English. It changed the way I approach challenges in life. Whenever something feels difficult now, I remember my English journey. I remember that growth takes time. I remember that small daily actions create big results. And I remember that persistence is often more powerful than natural ability. If you are watching this right now and you feel stuck, I want you to remember something. The breakthrough you are waiting for may be closer than you think. The sentence you cannot understand today may become easy next month. The conversation that feels impossible today may feel natural one day. The confidence you are searching for is built one practice session at a time. Keep going, keep learning, keep believing in yourself, because one day you will experience your own breakthrough moment. And when that day arrives, you will realize that every minute of effort was worth it. But before we finish this story, There is one final lesson I want to share with you. It is the lesson that changed everything for me. It is the lesson I wish someone had told me when I first started learning English. And in the final chapter, I am going to share that lesson with you and explain why it may be the most important message in this entire journey. Chapter 10. As I look back at my journey today, I sometimes think about the person I was when I first started learning English. I remember the confusion. I remember the fear. I remember sitting in front of English books and feeling completely lost. I remember hearing native speakers talk and wondering how they could speak so fast. I remember struggling to understand simple sentences. I remember making mistakes and feeling embarrassed. Most importantly, I remember doubting myself. Maybe you know that feeling. Maybe you are experiencing it right now. Maybe you are watching this video because you want to improve your English, but deep inside you are wondering if you can really do it. If that is how you feel, I want to share the most important lesson I learned during my entire journey. The lesson is simple. Never underestimate the power of small daily actions. When people think about learning English, they often imagine huge changes. They imagine studying for 10 hours a day. They imagine learning hundreds of words every week. They imagine becoming fluent overnight. But that is not how my journey happened. My progress came from small actions repeated every day. One new word, one short video, one simple conversation, one page of reading, one listening exercise, one speaking practice session, day after day, week after week, month after month. Those small actions slowly transformed my English. The truth is that success rarely happens in one big moment. Success is usually built quietly. It is built when nobody is watching. It is built when you choose to practice even when you do not feel motivated. It is built when you continue learning, even when progress feels slow. There were many days when I did not feel confident. There were many days when I felt tired. There were many days when I thought my English was not improving. But I kept going. Not because I was special, not because I was naturally talented. I kept going because I understood that consistency is more powerful than motivation. Motivation comes and goes. Some days you feel excited, some days you do not. But habits stay with you. Habits keep moving you forward even when motivation disappears. That is why I stopped focusing on perfection and started focusing on consistency. Instead of asking myself, can I become fluent this year? I started asking, can I practice today? Instead of worrying about the future, I focused on the next small step. And little by little, those small steps changed everything. Another lesson I learned is that comparison is one of the biggest obstacles for English learners. I used to compare myself to fluent speakers. I used to compare my beginning to someone else's success. Every time I did that, I felt discouraged. Then I realized something important. Every fluent speaker was once a beginner. Every confident speaker once struggled with basic sentences. Every successful learner once made countless mistakes. The only difference is that they kept going. They did not quit when things became difficult. They trusted the process. Once I understood this, I stopped competing with other people. I started competing with the person I was yesterday. Was my vocabulary a little better? Was my listening a little stronger? Was my confidence growing? If the answer was yes, then I was moving in the right direction. Looking back now, I realize that learning English gave me much more than a language. It taught me patience. It taught me discipline. It taught me confidence. It taught me how to believe in myself. Every challenge I faced helped me grow stronger. Every mistake became a lesson. Every difficult moment became part of the story. And that is why I am sharing this journey with you today. Not because my journey was perfect, but because it was real. If I could start with limited vocabulary, little confidence, and many mistakes, then you can start too. If I could improve step by step, then you can improve step by step. If I could achieve my goals through consistency, then you can achieve yours as well. So today, I want to leave you with one final message. Do not wait for the perfect time to start learning English. Do not wait until you feel confident. Do not wait until you know more words. Start with what you have right now. Use the English you know today. Practice one sentence. Learn one new word. Watch one short video. Read one page. Take one small step forward. Because one day, months from now, you will look back and realize that those small daily actions completely changed your life. You will realize that the journey that once seemed impossible became possible because you never stopped moving forward. And when that day comes, you will be proud that you started today. My journey began with a simple decision to learn English. Your journey can begin with the same decision right now. The next chapter of your English story is waiting to be written. The question is, are you ready to begin? If you enjoyed this video and learned something valuable from my English learning journey, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new lesson. Also, write a comment below and tell me about your own English learning journey. When did you start learning English? What is your biggest challenge right now? I read your comments, and I would love to hear your story. Keep practicing, keep believing in yourself, and keep moving forward every day. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next lesson.